Hi, I'm Amelia.
My father's voice didn't raise. That was the worst part. If he had yelled, if he had cursed, thrown a plate, I could have held on to that. But instead, he said nothing for a long time. Just stood at the edge of the kitchen, arms folded like a judge who already knew the verdict. My mother wiped her hands on a dish towel, once, twice, before turning her back to me. The silence was heavier than any insult they could have hurled. When I said the words, "I'm pregnant," the air left the room as if someone had broken a seal. Not even the fridge hum dared to interrupt what followed. And then he finally spoke. Not to ask how I felt. Not to ask if I was safe or scared. He asked one question. Who's the father? When I said I wasn't going to share that right now, not yet, he simply nodded. Then came the sentence that dropped like ice down my spine. Then you can leave. I didn't beg. I didn't plead or cry or throw anything. I nodded too, numb and suddenly untethered, like someone walking off a dock without realizing the water's too deep. I packed one bag, the kind you throw together when you're sure you'll be back in 2 days. A hoodie, phone charger, jeans, prenatal vitamins. The irony didn't hit until later. How I remembered the vitamins but forgot my toothbrush. My mother didn't meet my eyes. She stood at the window, watching the neighbor's dog bark at nothing, as if she had something more pressing to focus on than her only daughter folding her life into a duffel bag on a Tuesday morning. When I walked out the front door, I didn't look back. That sounds dramatic, but it wasn't strength. It was survival. If I turned, I might stay. And if I stayed, I might never forgive myself. The first few nights were loud. Not from noise, but from thought. My head echoed with every "what now?" imaginable. I slept in my car the first 2 nights, clutching a bottle of water, like it could solve anything. I charged my phone at gas stations, watched the bar creep up like hope, 1% at a time. It was early autumn, still warm enough that I didn't freeze, but cold enough that loneliness found every crack in the car window and crawled in beside me. I hadn't told anyone else. Not my friends, not my boss, not even the baby's father. I wasn't even sure I wanted to tell him. That's a whole story of its own. One I wasn't ready to face, let alone write down. Eventually, I found shelter. Not a glamorous miracle kind, just a friend of a friend with a pull-out couch and no questions. Her name was Mara, and she had a cat that hated everyone and a box of mismatched mugs that made her laugh every morning. She gave me space, and somehow space was the thing that started saving me. I found work at a cafe mornings only, less strain. The tips weren't great, but I learned to stretch $1 the way kids stretch the truth. Mara didn't ask about the baby unless I brought it up. She didn't pry about my family or lack thereof. She just made sure I had clean towels and sat with me in silence when the world felt too big. The pregnancy progressed quietly. I kept track on a hand-me-down app that glitched every time I tried to upload a photo. But I liked it that way. It was mine. I read books from the free library box down the street, the kind of parenting guides full of soft tones and impossible advice. I didn't have a nursery or a partner or a plan, but I had resolve. And resolve, I learned, can hold more than a crib ever could. By month 7, I felt the kicks regularly. Little reminders that life was still moving, even when I felt stuck. I named the baby in my mind Luca, a name I hadn't told anyone yet, not even Mara. Then came the broadcast. I wasn't watching. I didn't even own a TV. But Mara was, curled on the couch with her feet tucked under her. She gasped, and I heard the sound before I saw her face. I was folding laundry on the floor. Well, more like moving the same shirt around, and then she called me over with a voice that didn't match her expression. It wasn't shock. It was confusion. "You might want to see this," she said, and pointed at the screen. It was a local news segment, something light, the kind they used to close the hour on a feel-good note. A story about a charity gala and a surprise donation from an anonymous guest. The camera panned over the event. Lights, tables, expensive dresses. But that wasn't what stopped me cold.
It was the check.
The oversized check being presented to the director. Written in thick, glossy ink. Luca M. Ashcroft Foundation. My breath hitched. The name. The exact name I had chosen, the middle name included. And the last name, Ashcroft. Not mine. Not a name I'd ever dared say aloud in connection with my child. But one I knew too well. I whispered his name before I meant to. Ashcroft. Elias Ashcroft. The father. It took a full minute for the room to catch up to my body. My hands felt light. Not from joy. From realization. That last name wasn't a coincidence. And it wasn't me who gave it to the world. Someone had taken a name I whispered in the dark and printed it for headlines. I sat down slowly, the room spinning with pieces that suddenly clicked into place. Elias hadn't just found out. He had claimed the story before I ever told it. Mara was still staring at me, the remote dangling in her hand, the cat nudging her ankle like nothing had changed. I didn't speak.
Couldn't.
Not until the segment ended. The credits rolled, and silence settled into the space like fog. That was the moment I realized I didn't just lose my family when I got pregnant. I had lost my story. Someone else was already telling it. And from that moment forward, I knew I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was reclaiming. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the news story or the name, but because of the storm it stirred up inside me. The kind of storm that doesn't come with thunder, but settles in your bones and reminds you of everything you've buried. I sat in the kitchen long after Mara went to bed, staring at the mug she left out for me. Steam gone, the tea untouched. My hands traced the rim absent-mindedly, thinking not about what I would do, but what he had already done. He had taken my silence and turned it into a headline. Not once did he ask if he could use the name. Not once had he reached out. It wasn't even public knowledge that I was pregnant. Not until now. He made it known. Loudly. Elegantly. On TV. The next morning, I woke up early, exhausted but driven by a fire I hadn't felt in months. My first instinct was to call him, but I didn't have to. My phone buzzed at 7:13 a.m. Unknown number. I knew exactly who it was before I even swiped. I didn't answer. Let him wait. 3 missed calls. 1 voicemail. 2 texts. All short, calculated, and bearing that same energy I remembered from before. We should talk. I didn't mean for you to find out that way. Can we meet? Meet? As if this was coffee and closure. As if there weren't 9 months of silence between us. I ignored the messages and did something that scared me more than hearing his voice. I searched his name online. The headlines were worse than I imagined. Young philanthropist surprises local community. Elias Ashcroft pledges legacy gift in honor of upcoming fatherhood. The word fatherhood hit like a cold slap. They had quotes from him. Not many, but enough to frame a narrative. A young, mysterious benefactor making good on a second chance, inspired by a child, soon to be born into a world where legacy matters. No mention of me. No photo. No hint that there was another human involved in this story beyond his carefully polished image. I wasn't the woman carrying the child. I was a blank space he stepped over on his way to redemption. I finally opened the voicemail. His voice was soft. Almost too soft. The kind that lingers with apology, but never takes accountability. He said he saw my name once in a tagged photo and figured out that he always knew the timing lined up, that he wanted to do the right thing. The right thing. By naming the baby? By painting himself a hero? I played the message twice, letting each word dig a little deeper. Then I deleted it. He wasn't looking for a conversation. He was looking for an alibi. Mara asked if I was okay. I nodded too quickly. My silence said more than the lie did. 2 days passed before I responded. I didn't call. I sent a single text. Don't use my child to clean your conscience. No reply. Not immediately. But 3 hours later, a new headline surfaced. This time from a gossip site a little less refined, a little more ruthless. Mysterious mother behind Ashcroft heir revealed. It had a blurry photo of me leaving work, belly prominent, my name in bold underneath. That was when I realized he had made it worse. He didn't just hijack the narrative. He fed it. I called a lawyer the next day. It wasn't about suing. It wasn't about money. It was about identity. About naming rights. about digital boundaries, about preserving the sanctity of a story I hadn't given anyone permission to tell. Nyla, the lawyer Mara recommended, was sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued. She didn't flinch when I showed her the headlines or the screenshot of the oversized check. "Do you have proof he's the father?" she asked. I nodded. "He knows. I never asked for anything." "Doesn't matter," she said. "You didn't ask, but he took." We started building a case, not a courtroom case, but a documentation of misuse, misrepresentation, and public interference. Meanwhile, the messages from Elias shifted tone. Less charm, more pressure. He wanted to meet before the baby was born. He wanted a say. He wanted involvement. I still hadn't given the hospital his name. Then came the real twist. I was walking to the pharmacy when I noticed a black car idling across the street. Not unusual for the city, but the way it lingered for a full 10 minutes after I came out, that was new. When I walked past it, the window lowered just slightly. I didn't stop walking. I turned the corner and ducked into a store, heart pounding. From the window, I saw the car pull away. Later that night, Mara found a manila envelope in the mailbox.
No posty.
No return address. Inside were printed photos.
Candid shots of me.
At the bus stop. At work. In the park.
Alone.
Pregnant. Exposed. Mara called the police. I called Nyla. We both called Elias. He answered Mara first. She screamed at him. I didn't hear the conversation, but the way she shook afterward told me enough. He swore he had nothing to do with the photos. That he hadn't hired anyone. That he just wanted to protect the child. Protect? By watching me like a stranger? I called him next. He answered on the first ring. His voice wasn't soft anymore. It was tight, controlled, like someone trying not to crack. "You've made this difficult," he said. That was it. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I shouldn't have gone public." Not, "Are you okay?" Just that I was difficult. I hung up without a word. That night, I wrote the name on paper. The full name. First, middle, last. The one I had whispered to myself in quiet moments, the one that had once felt full of promise. Then I crossed out the last name, Ashcroft. My baby wouldn't carry the name of a man who used stories like currency. And just like that, the power shifted. He didn't know I had filed a cease and desist against his foundation for using the name without permission. He didn't know I had contacted the reporter from the original segment and offered a quiet, off-the-record correction. He didn't know I had printed every screenshot, every message, every piece of evidence and mailed it anonymously to the board of the nonprofit where he sat. I wasn't destroying him. I was removing him, brick by brick, from the narrative he tried to control. Then came the day I gave birth. It was a Tuesday, cold and rainy. The kind of rain that feels like it's scrubbing the air clean. I labored quietly, Mara by my side, holding my hand like a lifeline. There were no flowers from my parents, no phone calls. But there was one nurse who leaned in after the baby arrived and whispered, "You're stronger than you know." I believed her. When I held him, my son, everything else faded. He didn't look like a scandal or a headline or a legacy. He looked like possibility. He looked like mine. I named him Luca Emery Morgan. Morgan, a name with no strings attached. I signed the birth certificate alone. I didn't check the box for father. A week later, a new article surfaced. Elias Ashcroft stepping down from public-facing roles in his foundation due to privacy matters. The Luca M. Ashcroft Foundation was renamed. Quietly, without fanfare. A twist, yes. But not the final one. Because 3 weeks after Luca was born, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address. It was from my mother. I watched the news, it said. I saw the name. I didn't understand at first. But now I do. I don't know what to say except,
"I'm sorry."
We didn't know how to handle what scared us. We chose shame instead of support. But you chose strength. I hope one day we earn the chance to meet him. No apology for my father. No knock at the door. But still, a crack in the silence. I didn't reply right away. Not because I was bitter, but because I was busy feeding my son, showing him the world wasn't just made of people who left. Some stayed. Some learned. Some tried again. Mara stayed. Nyla stood by me. Even Joy, my childhood friend, sent a package with baby clothes and a note. I always knew you'd be the brave one. I smiled when I read it, not because it made me feel proud, but because it reminded me that not all stories are stolen. Some are rewritten. And I was just getting started. The days blurred in a soft rhythm after Luca was born. Feedings every few hours, diaper changes stacked like clockwork, late-night walks through the apartment with him nestled against my chest.
There were no news stories now.
No flashing lights or oversized checks. Just us. Just the steady heartbeat of a small life who didn't care about last names or headlines or the noise of the world beyond our walls. But silence doesn't last. It waits. And when it breaks, it never does so gently. The first fracture came through an email. Not from Elias, not from my parents, but from a private investigator. The subject line was clinical. Request for communication, custody inquiry. The body was worse. A client had hired them to gather context on potential shared custody and paternal rights. The email didn't name him, but it didn't need to. I forwarded the message to Nyla. She called me within the hour. Her tone was no nonsense, but her pauses gave her away. She was worried. This isn't uncommon, she said. We'll handle it. But it means he's not done. I hadn't listed Elias on the birth certificate. That gave me some leverage. But family court didn't care about emotional betrayal or public humiliation. It cared about DNA, finances, and the best interests of the child. The phrase echoed through my mind like a bell, without a clapper. Who decides what's best? And who gets to define interest? I didn't want a courtroom war. But I wasn't going to let Luca become a pawn.
So I prepared.
We collected everything. Public statements, donation records, his use of Luca's name, photos from events where the child had been indirectly referenced. Every time, he branded himself a father without permission. And then, just as Nyla began drafting the legal shield we'd use if he escalated, the story shifted again. Not in the media. In my mailbox. A letter from my father. His handwriting hadn't changed since childhood. Sharp loops, impatient slants, too many words crammed onto a single page. But this time, the message was almost hesitant. He's contacted us. Elias. Said he's the father. Asked for a meeting. We didn't say yes. Just wanted you to know. I read the sentence 3 times before setting the paper down.
He wasn't asking for me.
He was recruiting them. And for once, they hadn't immediately welcomed him in. That night, Luca wouldn't sleep unless I held him. I paced the living room for hours, staring out the window into the stillness of the night, wondering how much of this he would one day understand. Would he care that his name had been almost stolen before he could speak? Would he ask me why his father wasn't around? Or would he grow to see that absence doesn't always mean loss? It can also mean protection? 2 weeks later, my mother showed up. No warning. Just a knock at the door, and a bouquet of sunflowers that looked more apology than celebration. Mara answered. I stood in the hallway, barefoot and tired, with Luca wrapped against my chest. My mother's eyes widened at the sight of him. She didn't speak right away. I didn't either. We stood there, the silence between us shaped like years. Finally, she asked, "May I come in?"
I didn't say yes.
I just stepped aside. She didn't try to hold him.
She didn't ask.
Just sat on the edge of the couch and looked at me like she was trying to memorize the shape of my face. I offered her water, mostly to fill the space. She sipped once, then said, "We made it hard for you."
We didn't know how to deal with the shame.
And then we tried to bury it with silence. But you, she looked at Luca, you turned it into something else. I didn't reply. I let her sit in it.
The shame.
The silence. The realization. Before she left, she pulled a small envelope from her purse. It wasn't money. It was a photo. Me, age 6, holding a soccer trophy, grinning with missing teeth. You were brave then, too, she said. I just didn't see it. After she left, I placed the photo in a drawer I wasn't ready to open again. The next twist came not from Elias, but from someone I hadn't thought about in months, his mother. The envelope was hand-addressed. Inside, a single sheet of monogrammed paper. I don't condone what he did, but I also know him. And I know he's trying to fill a hole with the wrong things. You don't owe him access. But if you ever want clarity, for yourself or Luca, I'd be willing to speak. Mother to mother. I wasn't sure if it was guilt or grace that motivated her. But 2 days later, I agreed. We met at a bookstore cafe, the kind with creaky floors and handwritten chalk signs. She was already there when I arrived. Dressed in neutrals, silver hair pinned neatly, a half-finished tea beside her. She didn't stand, didn't reach for me, just gestured to the seat across from her. We spoke for an hour. She told me Elias had always struggled with control. That his public image was a shell built to impress a father who never approved. That he believed legacy was his only currency. That he never wanted to hurt me, but he didn't know how to see people without trying to own their stories. He thinks claiming Luca is redemption, she said. He doesn't understand that silence is sometimes the cost of harm. I asked her why she was telling me all this. Because, she said, you have power now. And I'd rather you use it with understanding than vengeance. It wasn't peace, but it was perspective. And then came the final twist. A letter arrived from Elias himself. Not a legal document. Not a threat. Just a letter. Ink on paper. He didn't ask for custody. He didn't demand anything. He apologized. Truly.
No caveats. No excuses.
He wrote that he had acted selfishly, that he thought building something with Luca's name would secure his place in the child's life. That he had confused exposure for connection. That he would no longer pursue custody. That he understood now that being a father meant putting the child's needs ahead of his ego. At the end he wrote, if you ever want him to know me, I will be waiting, but not demanding. I sat with that letter for a week. Then I tucked it into the drawer next to the photo of my 6-year-old self. Luca grew quickly. His first laugh came on a quiet morning in early spring. He smiled when the sun hit the window just right. He kicked like he was already dancing to a song I couldn't hear. I kept the table set for 2. Not for Elias. Not for my parents. For the truth. For the version of the story I was writing now, in real time, with every diaper change and lullaby and whispered hope. Not a perfect story, but finally one that was mine. Luca turned 6 months old on a Wednesday morning that smelled like rain and toast. I remember because the sky felt heavy but quiet, and for once, so did I. He was teething, fussy in the way that made every toy seem useless and every song feel too loud. But I held him close and hummed the same lullaby I didn't know the name of, the one that always seemed to calm him in ways I never could explain. I had gone back to work part-time. Nothing glamorous. Admin support at a legal aid office, mostly data entry and calendar management, but it was steady, and Nyla had referred me. I wore borrowed blouses and kept my phone on silent, checking it every lunch break, just in case. For what I didn't know, some habits aren't about hope. They're about wounds that never fully scar. It had been weeks since Elias' letter. Months since the news stories. And still, I hadn't replied. But I hadn't thrown it away either. Then the knock came. Not the kind that echoed like trouble. Just a soft, rhythmic knock on a Saturday afternoon while I was folding baby laundry. Mara opened the door, expecting a neighbor. Instead, it was a man in a suit. Not Elias. Not a lawyer. A stranger with a warm face and a badge tucked into his coat pocket. He introduced himself as a mediator. Hired, apparently, not by Elias, but by his mother. She was offering something unexpected, a trust fund for Luca. No strings attached. Not in exchange for visits or acknowledgement or naming rights. Just a fund. With my name on it. Not his. Set up in a way that couldn't be revoked or redirected. For his future, she had said through the man, because he deserves more than the silence between adults. I didn't trust it. Not immediately. I had spent too long learning that gifts can be cages if you're not careful. I told the mediator I'd think about it. I asked for every paper, every clause, every condition in writing. I read it all. Nyla read it twice. It was clean, legally sound. Luca's name. My control. I accepted it. Not because I forgave them, but because I believed in my son's future more than I distrusted their past. A week later, a package arrived. No note. No return address. Just a small wooden music box, the kind you wind manually. Inside, a tune played softly, familiar and forgotten. Beneath the lid, a card was taped. So, he remembers joy, not conflict. I didn't know how to feel. That night, I placed the box on Luca's shelf and watched it spin in the moonlight. Maybe some things didn't need a clear answer. Maybe closure came in pieces, not paragraphs. But peace doesn't last long in stories like mine. One afternoon, while walking Luca through the park, I saw them. My parents. Together. Sitting on a bench. Looking straight at me. I froze. My feet locked in place. The stroller's wheels stopped mid-turn. For a moment, I considered pretending not to see them, wheeling past as if the sidewalk could swallow me whole. But something in their eyes made me pause. My father stood up first. Slowly, as if unsure if he had permission to approach. My mother stayed seated, hands folded, watching Luca more than me. They didn't speak until I reached them. My father's voice cracked. "We'd like to talk. If you'll let us." I didn't agree right away, but I sat. A little distance. Just enough. They didn't beg. Didn't blame.
They just told me what they'd done since I left.
Counseling. Conversations. Letters they never sent. My mother pulled out a folded envelope. "I wrote this the night we found out you were gone. I never had the courage to mail it. I didn't open it."
Not then.
But I took it. They asked if they could see Luca. Just once. From a distance if needed. I said yes. Not because I trusted them fully, but because I believed in redemption, even if it was messy. They didn't try to touch him. Just watched. My father cried quietly. My mother whispered, "He has your eyes." We parted without promises, but with possibility. Then came the phone call I didn't expect. Nyla again. Only this time, it wasn't about Elias. It was about my own name. A local education grant I had applied for, one meant for single mothers returning to school, had reached out. My application stood out, not just for my essay, but because someone had anonymously donated the remaining balance to ensure I'd be awarded the full tuition. It was a private fund, shielded from the public, but the administrator let something slip. The donor said it was time you got credit for what you gave others. I knew who it was. Not Elias. Not his mother. My own mother. I opened her letter that night. Inside were 3 lines. "I didn't know how to love you when you needed me most. I'm trying to learn now. If you'll let me." I cried for a long time. Not because of the guilt, but because of the grace. The next week, I registered for night classes. Luca was sleeping through most of the night. Mara helped babysit. Joy, my old friend, offered to help on weekends. The life I thought I'd lost was becoming something entirely new. Then one last envelope arrived. This one from Elias. Inside, a photo. Him. Alone. Sitting on the steps outside the nonprofit he once used for image. A note scribbled on the back. "I stepped down for good. I joined a mentoring program for teen dads. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know." There was no signature. Just initials. I didn't call him. I didn't message back. But I folded the photo and slipped it into a box marked for Luca. One day. Because one day he might ask. And when he does, I want to show him the truth, not just the wounds, but the healing. The story isn't over. But now it belongs to me. To us. Spring came slowly that year, like a child waking up after a deep sleep, restless, hesitant, unsure if the world was ready for color again. Luca had just turned 1. We celebrated quietly. A small cake. A few balloons that refused to stay inflated. Mara made a card by hand. My mother mailed one, this time with her phone number written clearly at the bottom. I hadn't called yet, but the gesture sat on the windowsill, next to Luca's favorite rattle, where the sunlight hit both every morning. I'd started school again, part-time at first. Nights were hard, juggling homework and lullabies, printing essays between diaper changes. But something in me had shifted. I wasn't carrying it all with fear anymore. I was carrying it with purpose. That's a different kind of heavy. One that makes you stronger. It was a Tuesday when I got the call from the school director. They were inviting a few students to speak at an upcoming education fundraiser. Nothing fancy. Just a panel of mothers who'd returned to school under difficult circumstances. My essay had caught their eye, she said. My story. I almost declined. But something in her voice said this was important. I said yes. The night before the event, I sat at my desk, Luca asleep beside me in his crib. I opened the notebook where I kept small scribbled versions of our life. Quotes, questions, reminders of things I didn't want to forget. On the back page, I wrote one sentence. You don't get to rewrite the past, but you do get to reframe it. The event was small, maybe 50 people, most in business attire, the kind that smells like fresh paper and long commutes. I wore a borrowed dress. Nyla came. So did Joy. Mara held Luca in the second row. He clapped once at the wrong time, and the whole room laughed gently. It relaxed me more than anything else could have. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't talk about shame. I didn't talk about Elias. I talked about choice. About silence. About what it means to be written out of your own story, and then find the pen again.
People clapped.
Someone cried. Afterward, a young woman came up to me and whispered, You said everything I was afraid to admit. I hugged her.
Tight.
But the biggest twist came a week later. An envelope arrived in the mail. Thick, crisp paper, official letterhead. From a National Grant Foundation I had never applied to. Inside, a letter. You've been nominated anonymously for our Women's Resilience in Education Award. The nomination included excerpts from your fundraiser speech, school application, and community contributions. We are pleased to inform you you've won. A check was included. A real one. More than I'd ever seen at once. Enough to cover my tuition for the rest of the program, and then some. The nomination? It had to be Mara. Or maybe Joy. Possibly Nyla. But the attached anonymous quote read, She didn't wait for a better moment. She built one. And then she stood in it. I cried for the first time in months. Not out of pain. Out of recognition. That weekend, I took Luca to the ocean for the first time. He hated the sand, screamed at the wind, then fell asleep in my arms under a towel. I held him and stared at the horizon, the kind that stretches so far you forget there's anything behind you. It felt like a promise. Not of ease, but of direction. When we returned, I found another letter. No return address again. But I knew the handwriting now. Elias. The letter was short. I've enrolled in school. Community college. Psychology. I don't expect anything from you, or Luca. I just wanted you to know I'm trying. Not for credit. Just for change. I didn't write back. But I didn't throw it away either. 2 months later, Luca took his first steps. In the living room. Toward the bookshelf.
Of course.
Toward the messy, tilted stack of journals and baby books and one framed card that simply read, I'm trying. That night, I called my mother. She cried before I said hello. I invited her to visit the next week. Just her. No pressure. No performance. She brought applesauce and a handmade quilt. She cried again when Luca touched her face. We sat on the couch and talked like women, not like strangers, not like family pretending to be whole, but like two women who had failed each other and were finally showing up anyway. Later, after she left, I sat on the floor and opened a photo album I hadn't touched since I was 18. Inside were old family holidays, birthdays, graduations. But now, new photos lined the back pages. Luca sleeping on my chest. Mara laughing beside a birthday cake. Joy holding him while reading flashcards. My mother, teary-eyed, cradling him like a second chance.
And me.
In every photo. Smiling. Present.
IRZ.
There were no headlines.
No foundations.
No public applause. But in our small home, filled with books and baby socks and borrowed grace, there was something better than fame. There was belonging. One night, When the wind was soft and the city quiet, I sat down and wrote Luca a letter. Not to be open now, but one day, when he asks, I wrote, "You weren't born into peace. You were born into proof that one person can start again. That silence doesn't get the final word. That your name is yours, not because I gave it, but because you lived it. I hope the world is kinder to you than it was to me. But if it isn't, I hope you remember. I didn't wait for them to love us right. I loved us anyway." I folded it, sealed it, and placed it in the box next to the music box and Elias' final letter. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a guest in my own story. I felt like the author, the mother, the main character, and I finally felt like home.